Dune is a 1965 novel by acclaimed author Frank Herbert, and it's this title that gives him that acclaim. Today, the novel is the best-selling science fiction book of all time, but it seems to have been forgotten by mainstream audiences. The book on the surface follows the conventional hero's journey, but it's only when you really get further into the novel that the book takes on so much more life and nuance. I'm not one that's particularly good at dissecting or extrapolating on such hefty ideas, but I know that if you're like me, and even if you aren't, the book is well worth the investment. And the book is just that, an investment. The plot, as simple as I can make it, follows the story of Paul Atreides, and I'll just say right now that I will most likely get the pronunciation of some of these characters and places wrong. But Paul is the son of Duke Leto Atreides, who is the leader of the noble house of the same name. The story starts when the Duke is commanded by the Emperor to take command of the mining processes on the desert planet of Arrakis, which is also known as Dune. Now, the Emperor's plan is a setup to unseat the Duke and force his fans to fall in line with the Emperor. And it is stated very clearly by the main villain of the story, the evil Baron Harkonnen. We, the reader, never actually meet this Emperor until extremely late in the novel, and that's only scratching the surface of this plot. Basically, there's a lot of world building in the first third of this novel before the main story kicks in. So for simplicity's sake, I'll cut right to the chase. The main thing that makes society function in this world is spice or melange, which there's about 3 names for everything in this book, just FYI. Now, spice is only found on the desert planet and is used for practically everything from space travel to recreational drug use. House Harkonnen has been overseeing the mining of spice and is now being replaced with House Atreides, but of course, this is all a ruse for the Baron to get his long-wanted revenge on the rival house and for the Emperor to guarantee his absolute power. When the coup does take place, our main characters Paul and his mother Jessica escape and flee into the desert and go on self-discovery journeys that will forecast the remainder of this book. The excitement of the novel really comes from the very extensive world that Frank Herbert has set up and the dangers of that world. I found myself very entertained while reading about the encounters of the sandworms of Dune that are sprinkled throughout, whether it be rescuing a mining crew from one of the worms, or fleeing from one into the desert, or learning to ride one of the terrifying beasts from the natives of the planet. An issue that modern readers might find annoying is that throughout the second half of the book, pretty much everything goes Paul's way. There's very little struggle for him in terms of overcoming his adversaries. But, and this is a big but, in the course of his journey, he's able to essentially see all the outcomes of his actions, and every outcome is not a good one. He struggles with finding the better outcome, and he really just comes up empty. He's left with no satisfaction in achieving what he thinks is his goal, because he's left with the knowledge that this is all leading to doom for so many others, and even himself. It's this hefty material is what I think make people either love or hate the novel, and even its subsequent novels. The despair is what I took most from this book, and I think I'm supposed to. The villains get defeated very quickly and without much struggle, and we the reader find ourselves with Paul in knowing that he will end up being the cause of so much more death and suffering than the villains ever would. But don't let that scare you away. This is such an enjoyable read that I can't recommend enough. It's clear to me why it's been ripped off and used as inspiration for so much of what we know of modern-day science fiction and fantasy. There are so many characters, far too many to single out, that are all very interesting to read and get in the heads of. Many likable and unlike the same. It's not to say they're all pitch perfect. The novel does use obesity as shorthand for bad or evil, and has some outdated views on homosexuality, which gets even more problematic in the sequels. And I'm not going to be able to tell you whether you can or can't digest those things, but I would at least give it a try. To me, I feel Dune is well worth the time, especially if you have it. I was able to crack into the series during the COVID pandemic quarantine, and it was excellent for filling the time. So overall, I would give Dune a 9 out of 10.